Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Before You Go, the podcast created by Westerly Group and produced with the brilliant team at Piker PR, where we have honest conversations about loss, remembrance, and the ways we find meaning in life after someone we love has died. Today, I'm joined by Danny Lesslie, a widower, father, coach, and author of the memoir Thank You Cancer, which he wrote with his late wife, Raffaella. The book brings together Raffaella's journal entries and Danny's reflections after her passing. It's a deeply personal story about love, hope, faith, and the search for a new kind of normal after profound change. In this episode, we talk about the importance of sharing our stories, the courage it takes to talk about loss, and how conversations, even difficult ones, can bring light back into our lives. Danny, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Matthew. I appreciate it. It's an honor. It's an honor.
The privilege is all ours. Danny, obviously in that intro there, I gave a very brief overview of some of the things that you've done recently. But just to start us off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your story, your family, and the journey that's led to where you are today?
So my wife, Raffaella, she passed away last December, so about 11 months ago. And we have two daughters. They're 8 and 10. We battled squamous cell carcinoma of the vulva for like 5 years, which was my wife was like the quintessential mother. Like, she was always a mother. She loved being a mother. She was a doula. She just loved every bit of it. And this cancer affecting her reproductive system was like the worst. It was just so terrible. But she did it with such grace and such joy and such love that it was beautifully inspiring at the same time. And that's what makes me feel like I need to talk about her and her, just the journey, because it was an incredible one, and it was one that just, it leaves me jaw dropped still to this day.
As I mentioned, you've co-written a book with your wife named
Yep.
Thank You Cancer. I've had the privilege of reading it. Before we started, I was saying to you that it is incredibly powerful and it is well worth a read. The balance of your shared journey is amazing, and to be able to understand it from obviously Raffaella going through what she went through, mixed with how you were trying to support and also deal with it, and it is an incredible book. You always spoke about writing a book together.
Yep.
What gave you the strength to finally put Thank You Cancer together as a book after she passed?
It wasn't intentional. So in 2021, we were talking about writing a book. She was diagnosed in 2020, and we very quickly decided that we were just going to speak about our journey on social media, because when you have something like this happen to you, there are a lot of people that want to know what's happening, but you're very overwhelmed, and like sending text messages is a very inefficient way to allow people to know what's going on. So we just decided that we're just going to talk about it in a public way. That was our decision. So, and then we started to go back and forth, like, hey, this is kind of a crazy journey. Should we do a podcast? Should we whatever? And we were like, well, we want to write a book together. And the thought was, I as a caretaker have a very distinct experience with this journey of my wife. My wife as a cancer patient has a very specific journey, and these are unified in our journey together as a couple, but they're very different. And there's a lot of physical pain on her side and a lot of struggle. I don't have the physical pain, but there's a lot of struggle and emotional weight in my life. So in our union, right, we're waking up every day and choosing each other. And in choosing each other, you're literally choosing to climb this mountain that's like this. So there's a lot that goes on. And we both have always loved being parents. So there was just all of these dynamics. We thought we should talk about them, because a lot of people deal with these things and they don't all share. So for us, it was more about, let's open a space for people to talk about things, more than like, this is what you should do type of deal, right? It's like, hey, here's our experience. And it became a crazy wild experience over the 5 years. I mean, you read the book, but it was so anyways, kind of a backstory. So 2021, we were talking about writing a book. We very much ran out of days. Her health took a downturn. There was many tumor surges, and there were just lots of events that happened that just, a book wasn't our top priority. But my wife wrote the entire time. She wrote about her experience in very focused ways. There was like a certain event happens and she would write about it. And there's something to writing about something in the moment that it happens that gives it teeth, that recalling it in a later time you won't be able to give it those teeth, right? The emotion. And she was so good about that. And then I was also writing during this period. I was writing the same type of deal, my side of it. So after she passed, there was this void, this tremendous void. And if you've lost someone, you know about this void, and an emotional void. But there was also a logistical void, because in her final months, the logistics of just care it was like 24/7. It was incredible, just the amount of things to do. And so there was all of this space that I had nothing to do. And so I started to write. And that was just because I knew that writing would help me. It would help take the storm from what was inside of me and get it out. And during that time, at some point, the book came to mind. And I was like, oh, I could do this. So what I did was I looked back at her entries that she had written, and I basically just laid all those into a timeline. And the timeline was 5 years, and it was very spotty. It told a story, but man, it was hard to follow it. And so then I was like, well, if I took my writings and dropped them in the same timeline, the complementary ones. So then what I had was more of a story. I would say it was like a patchwork quilt of sorts that was like missing some patches. So then, and those are all in the moment entries. Those are all very vivid, focused. And you read the book. They're very, very vulnerable and raw entries. So at that point, I went back as a narrator today, and I kind of wove them together. And then if there was a piece like, oh, we need some context around this story about Cedric or this doctor or whatever, then I would add like a little bit of context in there. So then what you have is a story that's told, a very informal, like sitting around a campfire story. Like if she was here with us and we were just telling you about our life, that was what it ended up being. And it ended up filling out, and it was just done in a beautiful way. And then there were all these moments that happened to us that were indescribable. They were amazing moments that things would happen. Like we would be completely hopeless, did not know how to move forward. And then all of a sudden the solution would show up. And we started to call them Jesus moments. And there were so many of them. They're crazy. They're absolutely crazy. So those three kind of themes run throughout the book and tell the story. So it's a beautiful, beautiful story.
It really is. And you mentioned there, but obviously with your wife as the patient, and obviously as you as the support function. Sadly, so many people around the world are impacted by many forms of cancer. And when you there is just something that is relatable either to someone personally or someone that you know that will have been in one of those positions. And I think there is so much wisdom in there, and there is so much heart and things to take solace from within that. It is a fantastic book. You mentioned about Raffaella's entries giving some teeth and kind of like the majority where you then kind of filled the gaps. And I was going to ask you, what was it like, with something being so raw, what was it like to revisit her voice and her memories in that way?
It was, it was interesting because a lot of the stuff that she wrote, I had not read. I had read some of it, of course, just because we were in the thing together. But I wasn't, in the beginning when she was writing, I wasn't thinking about the book, so I wasn't like, oh yeah, that would be good here. That would be, I wasn't doing that. So some of the stuff I would read was new to me. It was like going through your memory bank, and then all of a sudden you have more of the story of what you went through. And that was really interesting. It was also heartbreaking. And it was very hard because watching your person suffer is really hard. It's really hard, and you can't fix it. And so looking back at the story, I wanted to be very clear and respectful of what she was going through. But you've got to tell the story. So, reading what she was going through again in her voice, in her words. And when you read someone's words that was your person, I can hear it. I can see her talking. And that was this crazy gift, but also it's hard. It's like a dagger that just keeps spinning around in you. But I know that this is what we wanted. So I kept writing, but it's very hard. And there's some really raw stuff in there. It's important because people go through this stuff and they don't talk about it. And I can tell you, as a caretaker, it is so hard because you're exhausted and you're overwhelmed and you don't know what to do and there's not a fix. And then beyond all of that, I just want to love my wife. I don't want to do all this stuff. Yeah, I do, but you know what I'm saying? There's this there's like the intimacy of a marriage that you want to have. You want to go on dates, you want to buy it, you want to make them feel good. And then you have no energy for that because you've expended all of it in the only thing you can possibly do to help them, and they're literally fighting for their life, and you can't do the things you want to do, and that's really hard. And I feel like no one talks about that part because it's so obvious the problem. Like, obviously we're focused on the cancer. Like, well, yeah, but like, man, there's way more to a relationship and a life, and that's really hard. And you're getting stretched between these things, these possible realities,
Amongst obviously parenthood and all those other.
Yeah, and that's not even talking about having kids.
Yeah, yeah, because like alongside everything else that is going on that life throws up on a daily basis, you're obviously dealing, like you say, with this huge focus, and that does the bravery in order to finish that is incredible. I mentioned to you privately that I had to put it down at times because it is just like nothing I've ever seen actually about the topic of cancer, because of the optics that you've got from both sides. And you mentioned you spoke about how writing was cathartic for you at times, and you were walking with a weighted vest, which when I was thinking about that, I was thinking about that weight upon you, and kind of carrying that for your wife and for your children, and about how it helped you through your hardest moments. How do those what might seem quite small things, writing things down and walking with a weighted vest, how do they help you make sense of what you were feeling, and what release did that give you?
Well, grief there's no handles. It is this thing that exists, and it's like a big gorilla is following you around every day, and it just, whenever it wants, it just holds you down and wrestles you, and you just have to deal with it. You have no choice. You could be in the supermarket, you could be at your kid's school, who knows? And you just deal with it, and there's no control, and that's very unsettling because it is an emotional takeover. It dismantles you, and you're not able to do anything. So I knew for myself that writing, because of my past, I've done a lot of blogging and things, that if I wrote about something, it would help bring some clarity. And that's all I knew. And I also knew that there's a storm inside of me that I have no control of, but I can control my willingness to show up and write, and for no end, just knowing that like that will make sense and move energy out of me. So that's where I started, and that was very helpful. But then I come from a background in the fitness space as well. I had a gym on the west coast of the U.S., and I know how important fitness is just in processing things, and the connection of physical to mental to emotional to spiritual is undeniable, right? And so I started to walk because I wasn't wanting to leave my house. I wasn't wanting to do anything. I wasn't wanting to do life. And if it wasn't for my kids, I don't know that I would have been doing anything. But so I just decided to walk. That's all. And so I went for a walk, and then maybe a weekend I was like, I should get a weighted vest. And I didn't. I bought it for the physical benefits. What I found was that I was choosing my burden, and grief it chooses you. Your investment that gives you grief is your love. So you've already chosen it long before it shows up. But this, I was choosing when I could like put the burden on, and I was choosing when I could get rid of the burden in this weighted vest. And I'll tell you, physically, yes, there are benefits, amazing. But I noticed that every single time that I would put that thing down, not only did I feel physically lighter and feel better and invigorated physically, I felt like my spirit was lighter. And I had taken the spoonful of grief for the day that I could. And then when grief would show up later in the day, I wouldn't try to escape. I found myself more willing to honor the experience. And so what I kind of came to after months and months and months of this was like, these writing and grief were containers for me. They were containers where I would focus all of my grief. I would listen to music while I was walking, that reminded me of my wife. I would think about her. I would dive into the pool of grief in these moments. And then when grief came to play later, because I was choosing to dance with the music in my life, because it's there. It doesn't matter it's there. And that was really a struggle for me. It was like, I have no control of it. So it gave me handles. Now, I don't know that it gets you through things faster, but it allows you to feel like it's not in control of you. And those things saved me. And those are just things for me. You could like knit or go fishing or, whatever. For me, it was something that would connect me to her. So everyone's very different in that regard, but those for me really worked.
It's incredible that it's the physical strength that you were building by doing the walking with the vest was giving you the mental strength to then tackle the other things that would happen on the day-to-day basis.
Well, I'll tell you, I remember walking one day, and I remember this was, I don't know, probably 150 days into walking with a vest every day. So you imagine like months and months. I remember when my creativity came back. I remember where I was. I remember the tree I was under. I remember the street I was on. I remember it. And I was like, it showed up again. It was an unrelated thing, right? I was like, I'm not out there walking to be creative. I'm out there trying to survive. I remember the moment that it came back, and it was amazing. Yeah.
But when you walk or you travel, you go to try and find something, and you went not expecting to find anything, but then you ended up finding something anyway.
That's when the best things. That's when the best things in my life have happened to me. It was when I was in the moment, focused on the thing I was focused on. That's when I met my wife. She just walked up one day when I was doing the thing I moved out to the West Coast to start a gym, and I was just focused on the thing, being in the thing. And she walked up and my whole life changed.
You've spoken about the grief process and how it never really ends, which is something I agree with. I don't like the term the grief journey because it suggests that there's an ending, and I think, as part of the process you go backwards and forwards, and people are perfectly entitled to do that because it's a very personal journey. But you described it as it changing colour. Now, it's 10, 11 months nearly since your wife sadly passed. How have the colours changed for you during that time?
When it initially happens, there's a lot of shock, and I believe that's your brain trying to just modulate your survival. And then as time goes on, it's like the door just lets more grief down into your life, right? There's all this grief that just can come down, and there's this sadness that won't leave. And that's been a real hard thing to contend with, the sadness that won't leave. And the more that I choose to honor that, think about like if you're sitting on a bench in a sunny day and it's so nice, you're enjoying the sun, and then a thunderstorm starts above you. Like, are you just going to sit there and enjoy the thunderstorm? No, most people are going to run. Well, that's grief, right? That's what happens. Like, it just, all of a sudden, it's like thunderstorm, and my willingness to just be there with it is helpful. And then I have no doubt in my mind, like, my wife was a person who joy would explode from her. Like, burst out of her. Like, why? Where is this joy from? Like, what is this? That was like a new language for me. So I know she would want me to be joyful in my life. I know she would want me to be joyful with our daughters. I know she would want that, but I'm so sad. And I've started to learn that. I remember I was driving my kids to school, and they turned Michael Jackson on the radio, and I stopped the car on the side of the road, and it was safe, it was a neighborhood road, and I got out in the middle of the road and I started dancing. And they were laughing so hard they started crying. And at that moment, it hit me that joy and sadness are on the same spectrum, and they can live together. And they embrace in tears, because you can laugh so hard you cry, which I believe is healing. And then when you're crying, when you're sad, that's also healing. But they can exist together. And once I started to realize that I didn't have to feel guilty for laughing with my kids, or I didn't have to feel guilty if I had a good experience or had a good day or something, things started to change. And grief is still here. I still was crying yesterday on my couch, but that doesn't mean I can't laugh if you make a joke. You know what I'm saying? And it's a very interesting time, and I don't have anything figured out. Like, we're not even at a year yet, but it has changed. And Andrew Garfield said that grief is all of the unexpressed love we have for the ones we've lost. And that changed everything for me. I realized that it is not a burden. It is not a weight. It is love that you still get. It's a bank account full of love you get to spend. How do you spend it? I spend it in writing. I spend it in talking about her. That's how I spend it, because it allows me to connect to her. And that's changed everything for me. It's not fixed a thing. It has not fixed one thing, but it has changed everything.
You said that people sometimes struggle to hold space for those who are grieving. What does it mean to truly hold space for someone that's grieving?
So I was that guy that could not hold space. I didn't know how to connect. I genuinely had empathy for the person, but I had no idea what they were going through or how to connect. So I'm totally guilty in that regard. Holding space is just honoring someone else's pain. It's not, everyone wants to fix it because it's uncomfortable. But believe me, if we could fix it, I would fix it. There's no, so it's Simon Sinek is a very popular guy, and he said something that was very profound. He said, someone who is willing to sit in the mud with you. We're just sitting here together in the mud. And I've had people in my life that have done that, and they just come and they're not trying to fix, they're not trying to get me to talk about it. They're not trying to, they're just there and they're just welcoming it. And if it's silence, great. If it's watching a movie, great. Whatever. And that's such a gift. And some people will go, and it's like a lavish gift. Someone will ask you to talk about them. Like tell me a story about her. Or they'll bring up a memory they have of her. And it's like, that's the biggest thing ever. Someone asked me that one time after she passed. And this was like in the kind of numb phase. They asked me to tell a story about her. And I lost it. Because everyone was focusing on her not being there. And that's the obvious thing that's killing you. And this person was like, hey, tell me about her. And it was like, so those are such, and I realize we live in a culture that doesn't befriend grief, that we run from grief. And so I love that you guys are doing something like this because it's so important. Because grief feels like an island that just keeps moving further from the mainland. Because the further they go away, man, people don't talk about her anymore. People don't ask about her. People move on in their lives. And that's okay. Their lives are busy. But there's us that she's not in my bed in the morning. She's not here for the girls, helping them with their homework. And you can't get away from it in our position. That's really hard.
I think that's where, and it's interesting from your perspective, obviously being in the US and with us being in the UK, that there's similarities around that, because I don't know what your experience is, might be similar to this, but when you are going through the arrangement of a funeral and things like that, you find that you're absolutely swamped with people, and they can't do enough, and they want to help and support. But actually, when that moment comes and you arrive at the crematorium here, and you know that everything that you've laid for that service is there, and it's about to be undone, you can't do any more. After that day, everybody else has to go back to their routines, back to their lives, and then you're left with a new routine to work through and to find your way. And it sounds like there's a lot of symbiotic kind of challenges on both sides with that. How did you find that new routine? What was it? Was there something that straight away you were like, right, well, I'm going to do it like this, or did it take you some time? Was it not really until the writing and stuff happened, or how did you work that routine out?
It's hard because when it's someone that's in your daily life, everything in our house, I could tell you a story about her. We chose everything together, the blanket on the bed, all the things. So everything that you touch in your day reminds you of them. And we stayed, she passed away in our house. We still live in the same house. So it's very, her memories are here. So if it wasn't for my kids, I don't know what I would have done, because they force you to do things, right? I'm a parent. I have to make them food. I've got to take them to school. These are all things you've got to do. But then, for instance, the first time, so they had never been to school, to a 5-day-a-week school. We homeschooled them. She passed in December. They started a 5-day-a-week school in January. So my wife was a teacher by trade. I'm not. So I ushered them into this whole thing of going to school. So I finally get them to school. I could not even talk to the teachers because I was so emotional. None of the teachers really knew. I told a few of them. And then I came home, and it's just the silence of the house. And that is, to put it in the most clear terms I can put it in, is it's a screaming silence. It is deafening silence, and it's so loud, and that doesn't make any sense until you're in it. And it's this glaring thing of they're not here, and we created this life together. This timeline is us together, and now it's me with my daughters, and that's really hard to come to terms with. So for me, writing was the start. It's like, I'm just going to go to a coffee shop and I'm going to write because I'm going to lose my mind. And that day came after a period of weeks of just laying on the couch watching movies. I didn't know what to do with myself. I was paralyzed.
No prescriptive time frame, and it's always a really important message to give to people that there's no time frame when you're meant to feel a certain way, or meant to feel like this, you're meant to feel like that.
Yeah.
There is no prescriptive time frame, and that quite clearly is articulated through your response there. In your pre kind of podcast questions, we asked about what a farewell means to you, and you said that you feel like a meaningful farewell is really for those that are left behind. How do you think it is that we talk about our funeral wishes and what we'd want, or while we still can? How important do you think that is?
I think it's really important. I think that's a conversation that is probably not had enough, especially in young people, because we knew we were dealing with cancer. We we knew that we both wanted to be cremated. So that was very helpful as the person that's left. We had, I would say, half the conversation of like, hey, this is where all my ashes spread. This is what I want to do. And we had kind of visited that a few different times. So for her, it was, she wanted her ashes spread in Italy, which is where she went for her summers as a child. And that's what we did. But those conversations are very important and they should happen. If you're married to someone, talk about it, because I'm 44. She lived to 35. Never would have thought my wife would be dead at 35. Never. And to have to make those decisions is agonizing. They're horrible. And we were the type that we chose everything together. So like we chose to like hospice together. So I mean, in that conversation I can't even tell you the stress in those conversations. But there's so much riding on these decisions, and people don't have those. And it's like, you gotta discuss these things. And I wouldn't have known unless I was forced. Like I was forced into it. So that's why I know. But it's important. And these are stressful things.
With that lived experience, then what would you say to someone that is struggling to start that conversation with a loved one?
Is this like, are you saying it's like a caretaker and someone that's suffering, or
anybody really? I mean, I suppose to give it a bit more context to it, it's tough because it might not be immediate spouses or siblings and other family members and parents and stuff like that. And generations look at funerals in a whole number of different ways. A personal account that I've got would be that I quite regularly sit down with my family, and given the line of work that I'm in and stuff like that, all of my funeral wishes are really clearly detailed, and my family know exactly what I want. Yet when I say to them, well, what is it that you want, it's sometimes met with a brick wall. But sadly, regardless of age, it is something that comes to all of us. And I always try to explain to people that when you go, not only will I and others have to deal with the grieving of the loss of you, that's then compiled with having to sometimes guess what it is that maybe they wanted, and then maybe second guess and question whether it was what they would have wanted. And actually it makes that process a lot harder. So I would say, I mean, what would your advice be to anyone, Danny, that maybe is struggling to start that conversation?
I think that conversation is uncomfortable for everyone. First of all, I think it's very obvious. And I know that what helps in those conversations is to disarm someone. And very, very often a vulnerability will do that. So if I was to talk to you about it, I was, I wanted to know what you wanted done with your remains after you passed. I would figure out what I wanted done with me. And then I would offer that as the beginning of the conversation. And I would say, hey, I've been thinking a lot about this. I would like to be cremated. I would like my ashes to be spread here. Like, what are your thoughts? And I'm not going to force you to answer. Offering my own experience, my own, instead of being like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, well, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. That's someone feels like they're on their heels. Also, another experience, and this would be interesting question for you to answer. I was going back and forth a lot with all of this for months and months and months. And I began to wonder, when you're with someone that passes, there's a moment in time where their spirit is there and then their spirit is not there. And it's very clear. It's so clear. In my view, what I believe is their spirit went to go be with God. So are these things where their ashes are spread, are these semantics for us, the ones that are still here? Because I believe there's something to it. I think it's important to do. But then I began to wonder, I was like, wait a minute, because you start to get opinions from other places about what you should do. Rightfully, didn't have the conversations. They're like, okay, thanks for your opinion. I appreciate that. But it's interesting because I do believe that it's important. Like, my wife loved the ocean. We spread her ashes in the ocean. I think that's beautiful. But I don't have an answer. And I wonder, because I think the conversation is very important.
Yeah.
But also there's like, okay, well, I don't know. I don't know that we know.
Guess there's that dual kind of story to where cremated remains where they go. And if you were to take your example about the ocean, is because it was important to your wife, but also it means that every time you go, it's an important place for you. It's an extension of a memory for you, and that would be the same for me, I think. So I very clearly written where I wish to have some of my cremated remains, and the rest.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy for my family to decide where they go and what they do, and if they want to keep me near, then fine. And if they think that I would have liked to have done something else, then I'm cool with that too. So I guess that's probably my view, is that actually there's that place of significance is for you both, and to extend a memory and extend a legacy for you and for them in terms of where they wanted to be and where they were happiest. So I guess that's what it means. There's a phrase about be known for the way you love, which I think came
Yeah.
from Raffaella's grandmother, and is
Yes.
very profound and has a deep meaning. How has that guided you since she's passed?
You know, it's funny because her grandmother was her idol. She just like loved her to life. But that saying was a big saying, and it was sitting in our kitchen. And Rafi would always say, that was like her aspiration. I'm like you live that, like you are that. If there was a sentence I would say about you, it would be that. So it's funny because she was trying to attain this thing, and I'm like, you embody the thing. You do not. You don't have to try to do it. You're it. Moving forward, it's a big calling to be known for the way you love, because the amount of grace that it takes to have someone say that about you is wild, and that's very, very hard. And so that's something that lives in our lives, and I aim at that target every day, and I fall short every day, but that's where I'm aiming, and it was big for us. That was a big thing, and then light coming from all this darkness. And those are the things that I aim at. And that's why I talk about her, and I talk about her story, and I talk about all of this, because there's so much darkness that it will overtake you if you let it. And to talk about her and to laugh about the stories and the funny things, that's bringing light back to it. And that's love, man. The love's still here. She's gone, but man, the love is not gone. And that's amazing to me. I didn't know that before all this happened, and it's still here.
It's legacy, right?
Yeah. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than all of us. It's still here. And so those are the things to talk about, and that's the thing to carry, and the torch to carry into the night. That's the one, and so it all comes back to that.
I've got a couple of quick fire questions just to
Yep.
just to round us off. So, one small thing that brings you peace on difficult days.
Sunshine.
Something you've learned about love through loss.
Love's bigger than loss.
A song, book, or quote that stayed with you.
A quote. It's grief is all the I would say unspent. It's all the unspent love you carry for the one you lost. That changed everything for me.
And finally, before you go, what would you say to someone who's listening that feels they may never find light again after loss?
I would say you're not alone.
Danny, thank you very much for sharing your story, and for the openness and honesty that you bring into every conversation. For anyone listening, Thank You Cancer is available now through Blue Hat Publishing and other major retailers. I got my copy from Amazon, and I'm sure that there are many other good book retailers who are available. Is a movie.
Well, if you're international, if you're not in the US, it's Amazon. Perfect. If you're in the US, it's Blue Hat Publishing. And those are the two places. There's no other place to get it.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you for that. It's a moving reflection on love, faith, and finding purpose again. And it is an incredibly powerful memoir of a very real story. Danny, if people want to find out a little bit more about you, about your story, and to follow you and how you go from here on out, where can they find you?
Probably the most focused place I am is on Instagram, and my handle is Momentum with Danny. And then there's also, I have a website, which is where like this podcast will live on the website. The website is Danny Lesslie, so DannyLesslie.co. And then there's the book link is there, coaching links are there, all the podcasts I've been on are there. It's just kind of the hub for all things that I'm doing.
So thank you, Danny. Before You Go is brought to you by Westerly Group, one of the UK's leading cremation and memorial specialists, and produced by the wonderful team at Piker PR. If this episode has resonated with you, please follow Before You Go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, leave a review and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. I'm Matt Brook. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.